So I'd like to show you another way to make a die look very different than it does in its original form. So I'm looking at one of these nesting dies, and I'm just going to cut this initially in its original form from some card. So I'm putting it blade side down onto my cardstock, and I'm actually going to tape this because I want it to leave the frame around it as well. So let's tape that on two sides so it can't shift when it gets under those rollers. And then we'll run that through and we'll see what we've got. Okay. So we've got our shape, which is our nesting die. Oops. And we've also got a really lovely aperture. I've just torn my card there a little bit, but ignore that. So can we see? We've got a lovely aperture, which you can then pop something else behind to make a really pretty focal point. And we've also got our nesting shape. Now, you can also obviously cut shapes and dies from patterned paper. So if you're anything like me, you've got boxes and boxes of beautiful paper. But try die cutting from a patterned paper. Things begin to look really different when you do that. So that's just another little thing for you to experiment with. But what I want to show you in particular with this die, other than what a lovely shape it cuts, and of course we can cut a smaller size to nest on top of this, or whatever it is you're wanting to do. But I want to show you how we can create a really pretty little pocket like this. So if you're somebody that enjoys journaling or scrapbooking, or you want something to pop a gift card into, or perhaps you've bought tickets for an event for somebody as a gift, or you want to give a little promise voucher, you know, I'll walk your dog for a week, or whatever it might be. A little pocket like this is a beautiful way to present something like that. Or in a journal, you could add little bits of ephemera, tickets, or personal thoughts. It's entirely up to you. But I love to use dies like this to create an interesting flap on pockets. So I've got some scrapbook paper or designer paper, and this is from a 12 by 12 page, and I've cut it to a 4-inch width. I've then scored it. It doesn't really matter what the measurements are, but just make sure that the portion that's going to be the flap is big enough to take half the shape of this die. So make sure that portion will be as big as half that die or slightly bigger. Okay. So once you've folded your paper into 3 sections like that, that's basically your pocket. And what we want to do is create that lovely shaped flap on the end. So we need to put the die facing the paper, and I've left my paper slightly wider than I need it to be so that I've got the opportunity to trim it back. It's easier than trying to cut it perfectly and then find that you actually cut it a little bit too narrow. So always leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room. I'm going to tape this in place. Now, how do we avoid cutting this bit? Because that's just going to give us a shape, and I only want half a shape. Well, what I'm actually going to do when I put this through my machine is the section that I want it to cut, which is that section, is the only section that will be under that cutting plate. If it isn't between 2 cutting plates, it won't cut. So the half that I want to cut is going to be under this plate. This half is not between 2 plates, so it won't cut. So when I put this in the machine, I place this on the platform and my lower cutting plate. I then feed this top plate through the machine, and I line up the edge of that plate with the halfway point of my die. And then you have to kind of hold that all together and push it through your machine. Once the handle moves, you know that the rollers have engaged the plates. So then you can let that take over. and you can feed that through the machine. And then when we remove the tape, we have a little half-cut label shape. Now, I have got a little bit extra at the side, so it's not completely let go of the other half yet. So let me just trim this down for you, and hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll bring up a guillotine, and I'm going to fold it up. So I've got this bit that was cut away. See that? Fold that back, but leave this flap out. And then I can see that I need to cut from this point, I can cut the side away. So let's pop that under here. And I'm lining up that point with the edge of the cutting blade. And then I'll do this on the other side as well. So I want it to go to there. And now that extra bit will come away. And we have our lovely little pocket. So you can use that in whatever way you like. You could even, if you wish, cut a second half of this die and tuck it under there so that you've got a contrast border if you cut the shape and just leave it overlapping a little bit. That's just another little detail. But all these little tips and tricks are going to help you get a lot more from your dies, and it might make you just look at them in a very different way. I hope it does. So thank you.